Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and a happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there. I know it's back to school time, for a lot of kids, college, high school, elementary, all around the nation. So to you celebrating parents, I give you a thumbs up, and to you parents heartbroken that you're sending a kid away to college or elementary, kindergarten, first grade is always depressing too for a parent. I'm on both sides of that spectrum because I'm old and weird. And on that note, I am Bob Rose. I am one of your hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner in crime and my slightly less weird co-host, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday. It depends who you ask. Some people will certainly say I'm up there on the weird scale, but nonetheless, yeah, it is a weird time, right? For a lot of people. I know Will went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Some colleges welcomed their freshmen like last week.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are not student athletes, at least, football teams have been there for months now. And you got high schools down this way. I'm not sure about you guys, but I guess if elementary started, high school starting as well.
Yeah.
So you got a lot going on, and I've never been in your shoes. I don't plan on being in your shoes, but I'm sure sending one off to first grade.
Yeah.
That's kind of you're jumping for joy because you could probably get a little bit more work done around the house. But at the same time, you're like, man, this stinks. My best friend what do I do? Like, my best friend's not here.
That's it. I mean, the dog was a lot more visibly depressed than me. She's neurotic anyway. But it was depressing sending the little guy off because he is my friend. But that also gave me a chance to get a lot more work done around the house. And as you know, I have a college age daughter too. Now, she's in grad school. So she's kind of living her own life, a couple hours away in Canton, literally about a mile from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But the days weren't too long ago where I was, packing her up and, moving her in to college dorms and things like that. So, like I said, I've been on both sides of the spectrum. And you say you don't plan on being in my shoes anytime soon. I didn't plan on being in my shoes at all, and I've done it 3 times. So there you have it.
Well, it happens, right? It happens. On a separate note, speaking of things happening, things that we didn't expect to happen, the Saints playing a game this past weekend out in California. I think that goes right up there with things we did not expect to see. So let's talk about that a little bit. It was interesting that the NFL elected not to cancel the game. There were some people pointing out, wow, this is getting oddly familiar with the Saints having to cancel preseason games due to weather. That doesn't quite happen, but it is an odd circumstance. And based off of some of our colleagues and their experiences there, they certainly felt it should have been canceled as well. But nonetheless, the Saints played a game. They won a game. They're 2-0 in the preseason. Take that as you will. It's the preseason, right? It's the preseason. It's the preseason. But some players continued to shine.
Mm-hmm.
Some stepped up into the spotlight, and as a result, we also saw some roster moves. So before we dive too deep into that, Bob, give me your star of week 2 for the New Orleans Saints. There's plenty to pick from. But at least in my mind, there's one that stuck out above the rest. Hint, hint, you may have done an article on this player.
My star for the game, I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with a unit, and that is the Saints defensive line. It was a position that literally dominated that game from front to back, from start to finish. The start, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson didn't play, but Tano Passanio got some nice pressures, batted down a pass, played good run defense. Isaiah Foskey, he had a couple nice pressures, looked a lot more decisive than the player that we saw, a week prior against Kansas City. Peyton Turner, I thought, flashed some magnificent plays. Then interior, Colin Saunders again played a terrific game. Brian Brzee The first round draft choice from Clemson, made some nice plays inside. And, like I said, they dominated from gun to gun. Even the third and fourth stringers, Jack Heflin made a couple nice plays in the fourth quarter. Nico Lalus single-handedly, destroyed Chargers blocking schemes. Just in that short stint, I rattled off like 7 names. Guys like Nico and Heflin, they're probably not going to make this team. But it made you believe and hope that if they do get cut, and hopefully that they can clear waivers and be brought back to the practice squad for depth purposes. Like you said, there was individual players that stood out to me too, but none as much as the entire New Orleans defensive line. I'm excited to see this unit, in full capacity come the regular season.
Yeah, you kind of said my guy in there because you took a whole unit. If you guys are new to the show, Bob likes to cheat on his answers. He likes to bend the rules, not just on the show, but maybe in life as well.
It didn't work out so much it didn't work out really good for me when I try to do it in life, but I still try.
Yeah, you still try. See, you're not a quitter, right?
Right.
You're not a quitter. You keep trying. No, for me, the first round pick, Brian Brisset, it was one of those where it's hard, and we've talked about this before with rookies, and having high expectations, not just rookies, but even people who just perform in training camp. You finally get to that preseason game. There's a lot of excitement. You're like, they've been killing it in practice, for a month, for a couple weeks. I'm really excited to see them. And sometimes they don't quite live up to that expectation. I won't say Brisset didn't live up to expectations because it's the preseason. Again, it's the preseason. But to see him really dominate and show why he was a first-round pick, why he was the number 1 player coming out of high school a few years ago, before he went to Clemson, that was really positive. The Saints have missed that interior force. And you could go back and say, well, Brendan David Onyemata, yeah, but really ironically, after the suspension Onyemata got for performance-enhancing drugs, he never really looked like the same player.
No.
And the Saints were really missing an impact guy there. And you can go back and talk about some of those interior defensive linemen over the years for New Orleans. Sheldon Rankins had a couple really good years for New Orleans. Nick Fairley was one of my favorite, one season wonders in New Orleans, as a guy who had a really good year. And then Onyemata came along and looked to be a steal as a third-round draft pick and just performing and being a constant. So the Saints are desperate need of that. Brisset really showed why he could fill those shoes. Now, again, and this is something I talked about even when he was drafted, I like the fact that the Saints aren't throwing a ton of pressure on the young kid right away. Right? They had other defensive tackle signings this offseason, guys that have NFL experience that are going to be able to step in, and you can play the rotation game there. A game that Dennis Allen has almost mastered at this point. 7-8 different guys on the defensive line just being able to merry-go-round and make an impact. So really impressed there. We both talked about defensive players, so let's just kind of piggyback off that. Do you have a guy offensively that really stood out to you in this game, or a player that made you go, okay, maybe I overlooked this guy a little bit. Maybe he has a better shot to make the roster than I thought.
And I'm going to try my best not to cheat this time.
No, go ahead. Do it. I dare you. I triple dog dare you to list the entire offensive roster.
Love you, guys. Love you.
Bye, Will.
He waved. I know a lot of people are thinking Shaq Davis, and Shaq had a great game. John Trey Kirkland and Lynn Bolden, I thought both played very, very well too. But the guy that got me the most excited to see was Kendre Miller. And I know Kendre didn't jump off of the stat sheet, especially running the football. I attribute that, he and Ellis Merriweather, who ran hard again. They didn't have any blocking in front of them. And I know we're going to get to our negatives in a minute, so I'll save that for then. But Kendre Miller with the ball, when he got handed the ball in the backfield, he wasn't He wasn't dancing around. He hit that. He looked to hit a hole hard. He was running hard. And you and I talked about this the night he was drafted. Out of TCU in the 3rd round. That this kid, and we both watched a lot of film on him in the pre-draft process. This kid didn't catch a lot of passes for TCU. But only because he wasn't asked to. We said, look, this kid has some nice hands and runs some nice routes. And we saw evidence of both of those things on Sunday against the Chargers. That wheel route. And by the way, Jameis Winston threw a beautiful pass. You could, and no quarterback in the league could have thrown that pass any better than what Jameis did on that play. But it was well covered, but it was a well-run route by, Kendre. Ball right on the money where only his receiver could get it by Winston. And Kendre still laid out and extended himself to make the catch and set up his own touchdown run on the next play. Granted, that's just a couple of plays, but the fact that Kendre Miller had missed the last couple of weeks, with a banged up knee, has you really excited, particularly due to the fact that, of course, Alvin Kamara is going to miss the first 3 games, while on the suspended list. So Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams, you got to be excited about that 1-2 punch.
Absolutely. That was the guy I was going to take. So I'll switch it up a little bit. And you kind of said his name too, but Shaq Davis had an excellent game. And I think because you're starting to see some of these receivers, and again, it's the preseason, it's a game, but these coaches are with them every single day. And training camp's a grind. You talk to any former NFL player or even current NFL player, and training camp is an absolute grind. It is an absolute day in, day out. I don't want to say you become a zombie, but man, by the end of it, you almost do, because you're doing the same thing. You have some 2-a-days. If you're in New Orleans or you're in Miami or even out in LA, you're in the heat too with your brain buckets on. So I can't imagine what kind of days or haze you're in by day 20, whatever. Shoot, if our friends and colleagues start getting into that kind of a daze when they're writing up their training camp reports for day 20, imagine how the players feel. But it's good to see these guys perform, and it's putting pressure on these other guys, right? And we'll get to some of the guys that got cut and waived and whatnot as well. And I saw it pop up in our chat too, talking about Traquan Smith now there's pressure there. There's pressure, and we can talk about guys that have already been waived, but like James Washington was a guy that when he was signed, I was like, oh, okay, this is a guy who could probably be, going back to the joke from a couple months ago or weeks ago, this guy could probably be the last receiver on your roster, just like everybody else that they signed. But you're starting to see those names kind of drop off because of how well these guys have played, right? And that goes for Shaq, that goes for Lynn, that goes for Keith Kirkwood, that goes, and the list goes on. These guys that were, they might be practice squad at best. All of a sudden it's like, well, they could see A.T. Perry, which I know you were really high on in the draft process. Yeah. Don't get a bigger head. That's the one thing we don't need. There's only so much room on this screen.
Right.
But at the end of the day, with those guys performing, all of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe we have more here than we thought. So I'll cheat a little bit. I'll highlight a lot of those receivers from week 1 and week 2, because they are really putting pressure on these veteran guys who, I don't want to say they had a job locked up by any means, but they definitely had the upper hand going into camp than some of these undrafted guys, or 7th round draft picks. So round of applause to those guys. I do want to touch on it a little bit just because it's fun. We're kind of in like silly, goofy season, because yes, we have news, but it's not always the most drastic news, right? They always say for the best times to interact with players is if you're a fan, right? So you guys that go to training camp, the best time is the preseason and training camp, because it's a little bit more laid back. You're not into the super serious parts of the season. I'd say the Bayou Blitz is similar. We can be a little goofy because we don't have the stresses of the season yet. So let's get into like silly season a little bit here. I'm sure you saw I'm going to call it satire. If it was written to not be satire, there's a little bit of a problem, but I'm going to call it satire. I'm sure you saw, and a lot of you that are tuning in have seen the article that has passed its way through Facebook and Twitter about Saints fans calling that Jameis is better than Derek Carr. So I do want to talk about that just a little bit. Like I said, it's silly season, or Saints fans want Jameis over Carr or whatnot. Jameis had a really good game.
Yeah.
And what I'll say about that is it confirmed my beliefs that the Saints have the best backup quarterback in the league. And say what you will, but I said the same thing last season when they brought in Andy Dalton. I said the Saints have the best backup in the league. And that might be one of the few positives and the few things that I'll, give a thumbs up to Dennis Allen about through his tenure so far, is that for a team that lost one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, they've really set themselves up with a really good quarterback room. I think Jameis, at this point, is the best backup quarterback in the league. You and I had speculated there might be some teams that made phone calls for him. At this point, I don't think that's going to happen, but he looked really good. I'm not in the boat, and I will never claim to be in the boat of, again, if this was not written as satire, whoever wrote that article. Because at the end of the day, Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Jameis Winston. 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. And you guys know, for you loyal watchers, know how much I like Jameis Winston. As a person, as a football player, he's just not what the Saints need. The old saying is like, timing. Timing is everything. The timing didn't work for Jameis and the Saints. The relationship started great. You had a great first date, right? Because week 1, that was the ultimate first date. 5 touchdowns against Green Bay. It was awesome. It's going along. Everything's great. Bombshell happens. Something happens. And you guys are kind of walking on eggshells. You don't really know what's going on. And you go into year 2 and you're like, okay, great. You're feeling good again. And then something happened and you guys are kind of on this on and off thing. And at this point of the relationship, if you will, you can see the writing on the wall. This isn't going to last much longer. The timing wasn't there, even though everything seemed happy-go-lucky there for a little bit. But anyway, long-winded way of asking you this, Bob. Your thoughts on the satire, I hope, article. And for the fans that may even think, well, what is that gap between Carr and Winston? Explain to them why Carr is by far the better.
I'll address that one first. Carr is better for the New Orleans Saints because Carr's best attributes as a quarterback fit exactly what Pete Carmichael wants to do for that New Orleans offense. And we said it at the time, and we had this guy, we had Jim Everett on with us very shortly after Derek Carr signed with New Orleans. Nobody is comparing Derek Carr to Drew Brees as a player, but Derek Carr does a lot of the same things well that Drew Brees did well, that Drew Brees did better than anybody, really. And Pete Carmichael and Sean Payton at the time built their offense around what Drew Brees did best. They've been very resistant to change that offense since Drew retired, or even since Drew started to go into decline. And as a result, that didn't fit what Jameis Winston does best when he arrived in New Orleans. This is not to say that either of us ever thought, Brendan, that Jameis Winston was a bad quarterback. Like you mentioned, quite the contrary. Both of us have liked Jameis. I like him as a person. I like him as a player. Would love to have him in my locker room as a teammate. But having said that, I would rather have him to my second string if I have a Derek Carr, because again, Derek Carr, he reads the field. He has great peripheral vision. He reads the field very, very. Hello, Carla. He reads the field very, very well from sideline to sideline. He has the arm to take deep shots. He's very patient in the pocket to go through his progressions. Jameis, on the other hand, I'm not going to say he doesn't see the field well, but he has a tendency to hold on to the ball too long because he's waiting for big plays to develop down the field. That's part of the competitor that he is, but it's also what makes him his own biggest nemesis, is by waiting for that to happen, especially with a banged up or underachieving offensive line like he's had. He's bypassing plays in front of him that the defense is giving him because they know the book has been out on Jameis Winston for a long time. Now, I'll give Jameis credit for that. I love what he did on Sunday against the Chargers. Those first couple drives, he did exactly that. He took what the defense gave him. He checked down. He swung passes out to the running back. Stuff that I'm sure coaches have been in his ear about. Jameis, this is what we want you to do. This is what we want you to do. I believe that Jameis Winston can still win football games in the National Football League. I believe that if he's asked, he could win football games for the New Orleans Saints. I'll go you one better. I not only agree with you that Jameis is the best backup number 2 quarterback in the National Football League, I think Jameis could legitimately start for probably 8, 10, maybe 12 teams in this league. But as long as Derek Carr is on this roster, the New Orleans Saints are not one of them. Derek Carr is simply a better fit for the team's personnel and their scheme that they want to run on offense. So I like to use the phrase, it's a numbers game this time of year. Usually I do that when I'm talking about the roster. In this case, it's a system fit. A different kind of system would suit Jameis Winston very well. And again, I think he could win games if he were asked to in New Orleans. But Derek Carr is simply the better fit. Dennis Allen recognized that. Pete Carmichael recognized that. Mickey Loomis recognized that. That's why Derek Carr is the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints and not Jameis Winston.
Well, let's talk about this comment here. Jeff Duncan saying the Saints might cut Winston and move Taysom back to quarterback 2. Not in agreement with that. I do want to touch on one other thing Jeff said, though. This is kind of a segue. We don't really need to talk about that one. That's one that Jeff and I are just going to see differently on.
First of all, I follow Jeff. I like Jeff for the most part. But I like Jeff as a person. I like his work for the most part. But lately, I've been in vehement disagreements with him. And I got to say, I missed who posted that comment. I apologize. I didn't see where Jeff Duncan said that. If he did, somebody's got to drug test him. I wouldn't rule out, and Brendan has mentioned it in the past too, I wouldn't rule out New Orleans trading Jameis Winston if the right package were offered. Feeling comfortable with a Jake Haener, Taysom Hill combination if something, knock on wood, were to happen to Derek Carr. But there is no chance, and I mean 0 chance, that the New Orleans Saints cut Jameis Winston.
No, I completely agree with that. Because if he would have been cut, it would have happened when we thought he was going to be cut, however many months ago. I do want to get to one thing Jeff did report that I find really interesting. And I find it interesting for a couple reasons. One, the player and how productive this player has been over the years, despite a down year last year. And 2, the fact that it is a report that Sean Payton is after another former New Orleans Saint. How many are we up to? Like 8 or 9? Does that sound right? Am I just making up numbers?
No, you're darn close. He's got 8 players. Sean Payton has got 8 former Saints players on the Denver Bronco roster, and 8 former Saints that either coached or played on his Denver Bronco coaching staff. So, all in all, 16 former Saints, not counting Sean Payton, are involved in the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just really fast last thing I'm saying about the quarterback room. When are we ever going to be done with this Taysom Hill playing quarterback thing? Are we, I thought when Sean left, we were done with it.
Me too.
But apparently not. I like the role he played last year a lot.
Yeah.
If you want to call that quarterback, so be it. If you want to call it variation of the Wildcat, so be it. If you want to call it Urban Meyer's Florida Gator offense, so be it. Like, but Taysom's not throwing the ball 20 times a game. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, Bob, because I don't know off the top of my head. But we were both covering the team for Sports Illustrated the year that Taysom started 5 games, the first time. And I don't know if he threw 20 passes, more than 25 passes. He might have thrown 20. I don't know if he threw more than 25 passes in any game that he started.
There was one. The 2020 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, where the Saints fell way, way behind in the first half. And he had to throw. Yes, the Jalen Hurts game. And he had to throw to come from behind. And the numbers, the final numbers weren't bad, but otherwise point taken. The 2 wins against the Falcons. I think he threw 18, 20 passes. The game again, the COVID game against the Broncos. I'm not sure he threw 15 passes. So I mean,
that was the weirdest game I've ever covered in my life. By far the weirdest one. That and then the Ian Book game.
Yeah.
Those were 2 that I will not forget. Those were weird. Those were really weird. But let's go back to Sean Payton. So Jeff Duncan reporting that Sean Payton is interested in trading for Will Lutz, as the Saints have a little bit of a kicking controversy on their hands. Historically, the Saints have always brought in multiple kickers. Always. And I think that's good, because anytime that you have a guy who knows he has a job, you're a little loose, you're a little lax during training camp. That's not exactly what you want. But this has turned a little interesting, because Will Lutz has been hurt. He is coming off of a career worst season for the New Orleans Saints. And you have a young kid who has shown a lot of confidence, kicked a game winner, not a long game winner, but a game winner nonetheless, has looked really good in camp, and is supposedly being, stopped by security at the Superdome because people don't know who they are. Those are my favorite stories, by the way.
Yeah.
Those are and it happens in every sport, almost every year to somebody. But it is one of my absolute favorite. Like, how? But on the same hand, you have guys that sneak into, like, I'm sure some of you guys know what I'm talking about. You had, like, fake Klay Thompson, who snuck into the NBA Finals because he looked enough like Klay Thompson. But anyway, I digress. Sean Payton has made it a point to go after some of his guys. And for anybody that's sitting there and saying, I don't really like that, this is the only comparison I'll make, especially because we live in the transfer portal world now, guys. And I hate the transfer portal.
Yes.
I think it's one of the worst things that happen to college sports. And guess what? I can say that now because I don't cover college sports anymore. It's awful. But that's what happens now. Kid gets recruited by Bob Rose. Bob Rose leaves and takes a better job elsewhere because he clearly won, conference championship at whatever Bob Rose was coaching. Hall of Fame coach Bob Rose over there. Fun fact. So Bob goes...
Plaque's right up there.
So Bob goes from, we'll use schools in your area, right? Bob goes from Cal Penn, my dad's alma mater, and he takes a head coaching job at Penn State because he's able to make such a drastic move like that from D2 to D1. And Bob recruited me to play quarterback, which is a terrible idea, and I don't know why Bob did it. But somehow
Bob used to have a drinking problem.
You said it. So Bob recruited me at Cal Penn, and then Bob goes and leaves for another job, and Bob's like, you know what? He might not be my starting quarterback, but I want a quarterback in my room that knows my system.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Bob do? Bob talks to me and goes, you should enter your name in the transfer portal and transfer to Penn State with me. Right? That happens all the time in college.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. Small school to big school to big school, small school to small school. People follow their coaches or whoever recruited them and whatever systems. And same when people have like a graduate year of eligibility, right? Even more so then, it might be their offensive coordinator took a head coaching job somewhere. And I'm going to go follow my offensive coordinator, my defensive coordinator. So why would you expect Sean Payton to be any different?
Right.
You know, like look at the guys he's went and got. Have any of them been absolutely monster names? No. But Dwayne Washington Jr. was a Sean Payton undrafted free agent that found a role on special teams. Sean Payton's looking at his special teams room and he goes, I need a guy that is familiar with what I like to do on special teams. Let me go grab a former special teams captain, right?
Mhm.
Let me go grab him. That makes sense. Marquez Callaway, a guy that was an undrafted free agent that Sean Payton brought in, had a career year in New Orleans. Sean's looking around. He sees two receivers lost to injury in training camp and goes, let me go pick up Marquez. That makes sense. I liked him. I think he likes me, maybe. And boom, it happens. Why would we expect it to be any different? You look at Will Lutz and his career. And what? He was very consistent for Sean. One of the biggest moments, one of my favorite moments, was Will Lutz's game winner against Houston in week 1. And his comments on the Pat McAfee show later that week when Pat McAfee asked, why is your name only spelled with one L? And Lutz responded by saying, I gave the other one to Houston on Monday night. I like that kind of confidence in a kicker. That's fun. But of course, he was so dominant, and he was, arguably the best kicker in the league, or most accurate kicker in the league for a handful of years. So of course, Sean's going to want to go and inquire about that for a 6th or a 7th round pick. Bob, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, Sean Payton has a kicking problem in Denver. They released former Pro Bowler Brandon McManus this offseason, which took a lot of people by surprise, and then signed Brett Maher, who is a former Sean Payton kicker. He was one of the guys that replaced Will Lutz when Will was hurt back in 2021. But Brett's not a real accurate kicker and has not been very good this preseason. So, Denver is one of a few teams in the NFL that have a kicking problem. They're probably not the only team that has called the New Orleans Saints to inquire about their kickers. It's just, since Sean Payton is a former Saints coach, that's what's going to attract all the headlines. But folks, it's more than just the Denver Broncos inquiring or waiting to see what the New Orleans Saints are going to do about their kicking situation. Lutz makes the most sense for Sean because, like you said, Brendan, Lutz kicked for Sean for since 2016 in Denver. Sean Payton gave him his shot in the league, and Lutz repaid him by developing into arguably the best clutch kicker, certainly one of, with apologies to Tucker down in Baltimore. And even though people, and myself included, have pointed to Lutz having a career worst year last year, that career worst year, you're still talking about a guy who kicked a game-winning 50-something yard field goal against Atlanta, kicked a game-tying, late in the fourth quarter, 60-yard field goal against Minnesota, and then narrowly missed a 61-yard field goal, to win said game against Minnesota. So, and Lutz has had a fantastic training camp, but undrafted rookie kicker Blake Grupe has been equally fantastic, and not just on field goal accuracy. He hasn't missed an extra point, and just like Lutz, and this gets lost on a lot of people, but it shouldn't. Just like Lutz, Grupe has been booming the ball into the end zone or down to the goal line on kickoffs. That's very, very important for special teams coverage. So whichever guy doesn't win this competition in New Orleans is going to have loads of interest throughout the league. Forget practice squad, even if you release Grupe, and I think ultimately Lutz is going, Dennis Allen is going to stay with the experience and stay with Will Lutz. There is no chance in heck that Grupe clears waivers so you can bring him back to the practice squad. So what are your options? And this is number one, and this is the one everybody thinks is going to happen. You look to trade one of them. Well, if you do that, you better be confident in the choice that you're making to kick for your team, A. And B, obviously you have two talented kickers. So the one you're not going to end up with, you better get a trade compensation and trade value back that you're comfortable with. Guys, what I think is going to happen, Will Lutz is in the last year of his contract, and we've seen this scenario play out before. I wrote about it for the Saints News Network yesterday. We saw this scenario play out before for the Saints at punter in 2020 when the incumbent, the iconic Thomas Morstead, was in the last year of his deal, but an undrafted rookie named Blake Gillikin was matching him kick for kick. The Saints decided to stick with Morstead through that contract year, primarily because they knew what they had. Instead of trying to trade Gillikin or knowing that they weren't going to get a shot back at him for the practice squad if they released him, in the last days of training camp, Gillikin came down with a sudden, and I've called it a mysterious, back injury that allowed the Saints to put him on injured reserve for that year. What that did was stopped any team from making a claim on him and allowed the Saints to bring Gillikin back to camp next year as an exclusive rights free agent. I fully expect that they will do the same thing to Blake Grupe this year. Lutz is in the last year of his deal, and again, you know what you have. So I think that Dennis Allen goes with him, and we're going to hear. Mark my words, we're going to hear Blake Grupe placed on injured reserve with XYZ injury that we hadn't heard anything about prior to that. Now, it's certainly possible that New Orleans trades one of these guys. It doesn't have to be Lutz because they don't need to create the salary cap space. So again, if I'm Dennis Allen, if I'm Mickey Loomis, unless Denver or somebody else comes in with a wonderful trade offer that I'm sitting back and saying, you're going to give me that for a kicker, then I don't make that move. I stash Grupe on on injured reserve. I'll kick him in the shin if I have to. Play out Lutz this year, and I'll bring back Grupe to probably be my primary kicker in 2024.
Yeah, it's funny because I knew exactly where you were going with that. And they're just going to take Grupe out behind the shed where they could keep all the pylons and the cones and the extra footballs, and he's going to just accidentally get smacked with something. I'm just kidding. That's not actually what's going to happen. But in all actuality, the IR stash is something that New Orleans has used multiple times over the years. Not just for this situation or even the situation that you alluded to with Gillikin and Morstead. There's been plenty of times where it's like, man, this rookie's really impressed, but I don't know how we're going to get him on the roster. And then all of a sudden, said rookie, has turf toe, which isn't like that is actually a serious injury, but just one that, you can't just look at a guy and be like, no, you don't have that, They come up with some injury that you don't have to have x-rays or MRIs for. It just bugs you enough to where you can't play. So nobody can sit there and be like, hey, they're stashing them on IR because at the end of the day, who does that? Because everybody does. Everybody stashes people on IR every year. But yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. I think it would be silly to move on from a veteran kicker, personally. Like you said, while he's still under contract, a guy who's kicked very well for you, a guy that's hit a lot of game winners, has been very clutch in his career. Clutch Lutz. There's another nickname, but I got to try to keep it PG.
We're trying to get sponsors, so yeah, I'm behaving myself too.
Yeah, better do that, right? So here's an interesting one. We'll address this before we move on because there's a couple things I'd like to get to. What is a player does not want to go, or why would a player want to go on IR is kind of what I'm getting out of that question. It's like, well, it's the under the table handshake agreement that Daryl Morey didn't provide James Harden. Oh, different sport. But it's the under the table agreement, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
Is, hey, listen, we're going to pay you X amount of money if you just hang out for a year.
Yep.
And a lot of times, you can put them on IR, and because of that, if they don't get released with injury, s- settlement designation,
Mhm.
they can still hang out on the facility. They can
Yep.
get the treatment. They can work out. They can do all those things.
Yep.
So it's like, hey, you're still getting paid for
Yep.
this season. You have access to the best nutritionists, the best doctors, the best facilities in the entire world. And we're going to guarantee that you're going to be our starter next year, or you're at least going to compete to be
Mhm.
our starter next year. So it's like a redshirt year in college, just to go
Yeah.
back to the college references. You're just redshirting. And for guys like, kickers and punters, where it's very exclusive, right? There's only 32 jobs for your
Mhm.
position. You are more than happy to take a redshirt year if it guarantees you're going to be a starter in the league, right?
Yeah.
No,
Now,
that's what it is.
and this was part of the question too. A player in this instance, can, I guess you could say, refuse to go on IR. That's
Dispute their
when,
injury.
yeah, and that's when, and Brendan, you just kind of dropped the term. That's when you hear teams announce that we've reached an injury settlement with XY player, and release them from injured reserve on an injury settlement. Those are usually circumstances where the player has not suffered a long-term injury, and more than likely can come back to play in the season. But especially this time of year, when you play, when you do place a player on injury reserve, it automatically means they're out for the year, if it's done so before the start of the regular season. If they're on injured reserve, but you release them with an injury settlement, then they automatically go back into the free agency pool and can negotiate with another team. But you're not getting paid, as you alluded to, Brendan.
Yeah, and Carla just threw that in the bottom too. So glad to answer that for you. Yes, you're still under contract, right? If you're placed on IR, you're still under contract. You're
Yes.
still a part of the team. You'll see a lot of guys that are on injured reserve end up being in something like I'm wearing, in street clothes on the sideline on Sundays, because they are a part of the team. They get to use the facilities. They get to hang out. They're still very much a part of the process of ultimately trying to win a championship that year. They're just not playing. Very much like other sports where guys are out for the season, but they're still on the sideline cheering their team on. They're still going to get a ring if they win, right? They're still a part of the team. They're just not playing. All right, let's talk about some more serious stuff. We got about 10, 15 minutes left in the show. Let's talk about Jimmy Graham, because this happened. We talked about earlier, timing is everything. That news did not break on good timing for our show. It was a day or two after we were on the air last week, and it was probably the biggest news that we had heard in a long time. And it was an odd one because and you know this as well as anybody, Bob, because you and I have done it for a living. When you have information to report, you have to report it.
Yeah.
But this is one of those stories where you have one report, and then you have a follow-up report, and then you have a follow-up report. So your story really changes like hour by the hour. And I don't think, at least in our industry, we do a good enough job of calling it a developing story anymore.
You're right.
To where, if you're watching like the 6 o'clock news, it won't say breaking news. It'll say developing story. To where when you're on Twitter and you're on Facebook and you're clicking through articles, there's not enough. It's just report, colon, whatever. It's not developing story, colon, Jimmy Graham arrested, comma, whatever the headline ought to be. So I felt bad for Jimmy, because there was like a 3 to 4 hour stretch where people were like, oh my God, Jimmy Graham got arrested, and then the rest of the story develops. You go, oh, okay. He didn't get, I guess technically got arrested.
Yeah.
But he didn't get arrested for any wrongdoings. It was being arrested for the safety of yourself, almost.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that. So Jimmy Graham, was it Friday night, goes out and is walking through traffic. He's delusional as the Saints are preparing for their second preseason game, and gets police get called. He gets arrested, and that first part of the story makes it sound like Jimmy got really intoxicated or was really under the influence and doing some dumb stuff. So where just a few hours later, after the initial reporting, is that Jimmy Graham likely suffered some sort of seizure that can make you delusional. I'm sure there's some of you in the chat that have either dealt with it yourself or have family members that deal with it, and it's a very real thing. So let's talk about that a little, Bob. The story changed awfully quickly.
Yeah.
And now the concern is not so much on what was Jimmy Graham thinking. It is more, where is Jimmy Graham's health?
Yeah.
And can we expect him to be in a Saints uniform this season? Because his roster spot was certainly not a lock either. I do want to report he did return to camp, did return to practice, and per our John Hendricks, he had a really good day at practice the other day.
Yeah, and that was great to see. And listen, I was the one that covered that story, a particular story for our Saints News Network. And like you said, it was a fluid situation, and you always have to be careful with wording, when you report on things like this too. And I had a lot of people come at me, that caused me to angrily come back at them because they were filling in the blanks that I did not and could not fill in based off of the information that I had. Jimmy Graham was arrested and taken into custody, for the incident that you already spoke on. What people don't understand is, and what the people that came at me didn't understand, and what some of you may not understand is, taken into custody by the authorities, in this case the police, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to jail. It just means you were taken into custody, restrained, for lack of a better term. That's a harsher way to put it, but that's basically what it is. For, in this case, as Brendan pointed out, for Jimmy Graham's own safety. He was taken into custody, taken to the hospital, where he was later released in custody of New Orleans Saints officials. I reported on the initial story from TMZ, and I also included the official statement on Jimmy Graham's initial medical condition from the New Orleans Saints itself. As reporters, that's all we can do, and that's all that we did. Since then, and like you said, a lot of people, whether they came at me or anybody else that reported on the story, some came at us, some didn't. But a lot of people were saying, "Oh my God, what was he thinking?" or automatically assuming he was intoxicated. You don't assume. You don't. And in this case, you look like an ass if you did. Jimmy is obviously undergoing more medical tests and will be doing so through the week in New Orleans. But the good news is, as you said, Brendan, Jimmy was back at practice today. And hopefully we can focus on football matters. Now, there is one legal caveat to this that some people are overlooking. Jimmy Graham was charged also with resisting arrest. Now, any of you, folks that have had, a hypoglycemic, episode, disoriented or anything like that, if you've had one yourself or you've dealt with someone that has, that those people can get very agitated. And allegedly, that's what Jimmy did. When the authorities basically tried to settle him down or find out what was going on. So Jimmy Graham, was also charged with resisting arrest. However, if this is indeed a medical issue, as we're hearing and thinking that it is, then that charge will most likely be dropped, and the next snippet of news you'll hear on the matter is San Diego Police Department, or whatever township police department it was in Southern California, have dropped resisting arrest charges against Jimmy Graham. That is the worst that he is being charged with from the incident. And like I said, now we can focus on his health, which is the most important issue, and the lesser issue is matters on the football field regarding both Jimmy Graham and the New Orleans Saints.
Absolutely. And like you said, that's the biggest concern is Jimmy's health, right? To be at 36, 37 years old, starting to show some signs of some issues like that. Like that's a concern, especially over the last decade where the NFL has taken like CTE and head injuries into consideration a lot more than they did. You are genuinely concerned for Jimmy's health, and we'll find out more as the story continues to develop. But I did feel bad that there was a solid stretch of time where Jimmy was put in a less than promising light, for lack of a better term, for something he really couldn't control, a medical issue from what we're hearing that he can't control. So, we'll have more on it as it develops.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to talk about that a little bit for the people that maybe missed the latter half of that story. I want to make sure everybody gets that straight. So let's talk about this. Houston Texans, New Orleans Saints. Supposed to have a dual practice coming up, and the teams had put out a statement saying that they will not be holding joint practices this week. It came a little sudden. Bob, you have some information on why the teams are electing not to go that way.
Yeah, and according to a lot of the things that we've heard, the initial request was actually made by Houston Texans coach DeMeco Ryans, who, in speaking to Dennis Allen, did not feel comfortable with, did not want to participate in the dual team scrimmages because of the amount of injuries on the Houston Texans side. Reportedly, Dennis Allen quickly agreed with Ryans, and the two sides, immediately agreed and then announced that the dual sessions between the teams would be canceled and that they would just practice on their own in their own facilities until they played the game this Sunday. And it is the final weekend of preseason games throughout the league, not just for these two teams, with mandatory cut down day coming the following Tuesday, August 29th.
Yeah, so you and I are going to have a lot to talk about next week with those cut down days coming up in just one cut down day.
Yeah.
This year opposed to multiple. Running out of time. I think when you get to preseason week 3, there's a lot of guys you can talk about, a lot of things you'd like to see, but ultimately it comes down to roster bubble guys. So let's quickly talk about some of the moves that had been made by New Orleans and some of the guys that you feel are going to be on the roster bubble. That'll be our daughter drop for this week. So first and foremost, Bob, catch everybody up. Who's been waived? Who waved back? Who didn't wave back? But what's been going on for the New Orleans Saints and some of the moving pieces of the puzzle?
Wide receiver Bryan Edwards, no soup for you. You are not in the New Orleans Saints roster in 2023. Frankly, Mr. Edwards, you are lucky the New Orleans Saints even allowed you to make the trip back with them, from Los Angeles after the abysmal and inexcusable performance, and I use that term loosely, that you put out, against the LA Chargers on Sunday. So the veteran receivers that the Saints have released in less than 2 weeks' time include Kiki Kute, James Washington, and now Bryan Edwards, which leaves us down to, and let's kick off with this position. A, do the Saints keep 5 or 6 wide receivers? And B, who are they? We know Olave, we know Thomas, we know Shaheed. I'm pretty sure that A.T. Perry, I'm not going to call him a roster lock, but I would call it a major upset if he did not make the roster. So let's say 4 spots are taken up. You got 1 or 2 spots to fill with our favorite, Traquan Smith, Lynn Bowden, Shaq Davis, John Trey Kirkland, Keith Kirkwood, or Kawan Baker.
You know what's crazy is if you asked me this question like 2 weeks ago, I would have said the Saints keep 6. I'm leaning towards 5. I could see 6, so I'll cheat. I'll give you answers for both.
Fair.
If the Saints keep 5 and only 5, it'll be Traquan Smith. As much as people aren't going to want to hear that. Because very similar to Will Lutz, you're going to take the experience over some of these inexperienced guys, and some of those inexperienced guys that you brought up, the Shaq Davises, the Lins of the world, those are going to be guys you could probably stash on your practice squad,
right,
and not have a whole lot of issues with. If the Saints keep 6, what I think would be a more likely scenario if they keep 6, Traquan is either put on IR, physically unable to perform, or straight out cut. So for depth purposes and special teams purposes, the Saints would keep 6. They would bring back the most experienced player out of that group, my guy, Keith Kirkwood, who has had a good offseason. And remember, he has been on multiple rosters, New Orleans, and played games in Carolina as well. So it would make a lot of sense to bring just the familiarity and the experience back. And then they'd pick one of those guys that they felt would be more of a threat to leave if they hit the waiver wire. I think that would be Shaq Davis with how he's performed in the preseason. Those would be the 2 if they keep 6. If it's just Traquan, it'll be 5.
And folks that follow me, or especially y'all that watch this show, that I would drive to New Orleans and pack Traquan Smith's bags for him. If that meant he was getting out of town. But I've also been a realist all off season, and I've said that I wasn't sure that the backups on this roster had enough to surpass Traquan. But I'll tell you, the fact, it's not so much that Traquan has not played in the preseason, it's that he hasn't even dressed for practice. That is starting to make me believe that the Saints might either put him on injured reserve or have him start the year on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. And like you, I've said all along that if the Saints keep 6 wideouts onto their active roster, that 6th guy would be a return specialist. They've used Lynn Bowden that way. They've tried out John Trey Kirkland in that way. And both players have had some good moments, but have not really stood out. I am now thinking that the Saints are going to keep 5 here. 5 wideouts, and they're going to go with a combination of, they'll probably have Shaheed return punts, which he's healthy, and they'll have Ellis Merriweather, Kendre Miller, maybe even Taysom Hill, return kickoffs. So they're going to go with kind of a committee approach until some guy steps forward. So for that 5th guy, assuming Traquan is going to continue to be injured, I agree with you. Shaq Davis has done some good things. Bowden, Kirkland have both done some good things, but I think they go big wide out possession guy with experience, and I think Keith Kirkwood is that 5th.
Makes me happy to hear that, because again, if you asked me like 2 or 3 weeks ago, even when training camp started, I said he's on the outside looking in. Like,
right,
it's just not going to happen. As much as I like the guy. And he's had good moments, and I think the experience is a key part of all that. Timing is everything, like we talked about a lot, and timing is on his side, where he's not the young cat anymore. He's the seasoned vet that's been in the system, that's caught passes from a handful of Saints quarterbacks now. So let's close the show on this, and I think what would be fun, and I think Bob, you'll be in agreement, is if we put out some polls this week on Twitter with some of our roster bubble guys, and maybe we just pop in for a quick thoughts when the roster moves happen on Tuesday. Go a little bit more in depth on Wednesday.
I have to look at my schedule.
You're a busy guy on Tuesdays, aren't you? Yeah, you got Under the Dome. Yeah, you got Under the Dome. You got Jordy. And maybe I'll reach out to our buddy Alan. Maybe we can do a little bit of a quick 15-20 minute thing on Under the Dome. We'll keep you guys all informed.
Listen, we might be able to figure out something, on here, on Under the Dome, StreamYard, Facebook Live, and if we do it, folks, you got to be a member of the Bayou Blitz Facebook group to do it. Ooh, there we go. There we go.
Some exclusive stuff.
Yeah, it's about time we do that. Other than the OnlyFans Bayou Blitz calendar that we're going to have.
Right.
Man.
Just Bob, though. It's just
right.
Bob.
That's why I didn't post too many beach pics this summer. I'm saving them. I know we're actually a little bit over time, but yeah, we can both agree that they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks, right? All 3 quarterbacks. Yeah. Carr wins. Okay.
No, 4. Taysom Hill.
Right. If you count Taysom Hill as a tight end, are they going to keep 4 tight ends? And if so, is Jimmy Graham going to make the roster?
Jimmy will make the roster.
Okay, agree. Alvin Kamara suspended for the first 3 games, so folks, he won't count as a roster spot. That's very important to remember here. Jamal Williams in, certainly. Kendry Miller in, certainly. Do you keep one? Adam Prentice is probably going to be your fullback. Do you keep 1 or 2 running backs to start the year behind Miller and Jamal, and if so, who?
I think you keep 2, and you give an opportunity, or no, because you could just call them up from the practice squad, can't you?
You could, yeah.
You keep 1 on the roster, you stash 1 on the practice squad, you're able to call them up for a couple games. In terms of who, I mean, I think Ellis Merriweather's probably the guy you keep on the practice squad and call him up. It just depends. It depends. Who do the Saints feel like they can stash them? That's what it's going to come down to. And maybe you sit them for a lot of this game if you feel like, hey, I don't want people to have more tape. That's the crazy part about when you get to these end of the preseason games, because a lot of it's mind games. I don't want this guy to be in the spotlight. I don't want more tape on this guy. I want to be able to stash him. Everybody's playing that game. But I think with Kamara out, you keep 3, and then you have 1 on the practice squad.
Now, I've been a little bit of disagreement with you, not with the number of players, because I think you're right. But I think Merriweather gets the shot behind Kendry and Jamal. And they'll try to bring Darrell Williams back to the practice squad. If they can't, if he doesn't clear waivers, then they'll just go out and get another veteran back that they could elevate if they had to. Offensive line, I don't even want to talk about offensive line.
It's been a fun day. It's been a silly fun day. Let's not bring it down.
Defensive line, pretty easy to call if they keep 9 players. Cam Granderson, Peyton Turner, Passanio, Foskey, Brissy, Saunders, Shepard, Roach. You in disagreement with any of those?
No, they should all make the team.
Okay. How about Jack Heflin or Nico Lalos? Have either of them done enough to force the Saints to keep a 10th defensive lineman?
No, because I think you can get away with stashing who you want. I think Nico is going to be an interesting one. I think that's going to be one to really watch because he did make some noise, and Dennis Allen even sung his praises a little bit. But I think they can get away with stashing him.
Okay. Linebacker outside of the 3, Demario Warner and Jalen Smith. I don't know, man. That's a toss-up, but we don't have enough time for that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I could say, but all right, real quick. DeMarco Jackson, Nephi Sewell, if they keep 2, if they keep a 3rd, I think Ty Summers sneaks his way in there. I've said it all summer. I don't think Zach Bond makes this team.
See, I'm in disagreement because I've always valued him as a special teams guy.
I think Ty Summers has actually outplayed him, and so is Anthony Orji. Even on special teams, I think that's little of Zach Bond, right? Zach Bond is my Traquan Smith of the defense.
Well, just like Traquan Smith, he's going to be kept because of experience. I'm telling you what, it's because for whatever I think similarly, but I've noticed whether it was Sean or even if this short little reign with Dennis Allen, this team, and maybe it's more the front office than it is the head coach, they really value experience.
They do.
And they value guys that have been here.
They do, which goes back to what you said at running back about Darrell Williams over Ellis Merriweather, excuse me.
Yeah. They value NFL experience, and they even more so value NFL experience in New Orleans.
Yeah.
They just
secondary. Well, we'll lump cornerback and safety together. Secondary, Marshawn, Alontae Taylor, Adebo, Bradley, Roby, cornerbacks, Matthew, May, Howden, safety. You're not in disagreement with any of those, right?
No.
Okay. Remember,
Bradley Roby's like the best number 4 corner in the league too.
Yeah. Now remember, May's legal proceedings for that DUI have been settled. So the next thing we're going to hear from the league is the amount. He is going to get suspended. Let's face reality here. If Marcus May gets suspended for the beginning or close to the beginning of the regular season, just like Kamara, he doesn't count for a roster spot while he's suspended. So real quick, give me a yay or nay on whether they've done enough to make the team. You go, Amadi.
If May is suspended, yes. If not, he'll be on the practice squad.
Really? Okay. I'm interested to get your take on some of these other ones then.
Yeah.
Lonnie Johnson, yay or nay?
Lonnie Johnson's a guy that they view as being like PJ Williams-esque. I don't know if he's lived up to it. He's had some moments.
Right.
But I think he'll probably make the team, yeah.
Okay. See, I think Hugo has played the PJ role better than Lonnie. I agree with you.
I do think that. It's just again, this team they are in love with guys that have played if they've played a single snap in the NFL, they have an upper hand.
Yeah, and then in that line of thinking, I know what you're going to say about this guy, JT Gray, yay or nay?
Well, I think it's a yay just based off special teams.
Right. Okay.
That no question.
Smoke Monday, yay or nay?
No.
Okay.
No. Practice squad.
Yeah.
If they like him enough. I mean,
Agreed.
yes, he's a great story. Like, was a fan favorite, but
Okay. Jonathan Abram, yay or nay?
No, he's not going to make the team.
Okay. Agreed. Isaac Yiadom, the cornerback. Okay. Tony Price.
I mean, it's hard because me personally would like to see a 5th corner, but if you're going to keep these hybrid safety corners, then you don't really need a true 5th corner.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no.
Okay. Tony Pride.
Another guy that's had moments, but I don't think so.
Okay. Anthony Johnson.
I don't think so. I think I'm pretty set where I'm at.
Okay. So in the secondary, the only difference you and I have Amadi in, and I have Lonnie just on the outside looking in, unless May is suspended to start the year, then Lonnie's in. You go just the opposite. You have Lonnie in and Amadi in only if May is suspended to start the year.
Which he could very well be a practice squad elevation for those games because I don't see May getting more than 2 games.
Okay. Zach Woods, your long snapper. Blake Gillikin or Lou Headley's your punter?
Gillikin.
Okay. Agreed.
Even with a bad year.
Agreed. I think you pretty much addressed this earlier, but I'll ask it again anyway. You going with Lutz or Groupie as your kicker?
Lutz will make the team. Groupie will suffer a very heartbreaking left pinky toe injury the last day of training camp.
We don't have a lot of different. We have a couple unique ones, but yeah, no difference. There you have it, folks.
That's our predictions.
That's it.
I'm sure Bob will actually type his out.
I will. I will.
I do want to address this too, very quick, because I know we're way over anyway. Former New Orleans Saints news, and you and I kind of talked about it before we got on. Reggie Bush finally taking matters into his own hands about his Heisman Trophy. Just quick thoughts on that, Bob.
It was ridiculous in the first place. I mean, yeah, Reggie was in the wrongdoing. There have been a lot of college football players that have done, equal or worse things than him, and haven't been besmirched in the public eye as nearly as much as Reggie Bush has. At least if USC doesn't want to have anything to do with him, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But you can't erase what Reggie Bush did on the football field. Give the man back his damn Heisman Trophy.
Fully agree. In every situation, there is one person who ends up being the example, right? We're gonna use this guy to prove a point. And in the case of the NCAA versus players making money and under the table deals with the universities, Reggie Bush was made the example.
Mm-hmm.
But to Bob's point, I don't care if Reggie Bush played at Northeast Western Southern College of the Dakotas. Like, I don't care where he would have. He could have played anywhere, and he was the best player in the country.
Mm-hmm.
He could have played anywhere, and he would have changed college football. Right, and ultimately, that's what Reggie Bush is on that short list of people that changed college football.
Yep. But meanwhile, his coach at USC, Pete Carroll, who literally had multiple pages of recruiting and academic violations as the coach of USC, saw the NCAA sanctions coming, ducked town to become a coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Pete Carroll's never gotten a slap on the wrist.
Nope. And I hate it for Reggie. I hope that he gets his Heisman back. I hope he wins his case of defamation, because I think he has, obviously, I think so, and I'm not a lawyer. I think he has a very good case. But give the guy his Heisman Trophy back. I mean, it's a joke that he can't be on that short list of guys that has won a Heisman Trophy, won a national championship, and won a Super Bowl. Right? He can't be on that list because they said no, slap on hand, give me my toys back, like give me my ball, like, and I'm gonna go home. Like, no, I mean, he's one of the most one of the most decorated college football players of all time. And, say what you will, because he was one of the most hyped athletes coming into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
He had a really good NFL career.
Yeah.
He had a really good NFL career. People, I think, very quickly forget the back-to-back. Maybe it wasn't back-to-back. Maybe it was one 1,000-yard year in Miami and one that was really close. It was like 990 or something like that. But he had like 2 or 3 really good years in Miami, had a solid year in Detroit, and then got hurt. And then bounced around San Francisco, Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
wherever else. But he won a Super Bowl. Like, he's got an 1,000-yard rushing season. He had a good NFL career. Now just give him his dang Heisman Trophy back.
Yeah.
Good Lord. That's one thing that I'll never – I mean, I could get really worked up. I won't. But it's just one of those things. It's just – I hate when people – even when people are made the example, to take something away from someone that they earned is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you feel, Bob? And I promise this won't go on much longer because you guys are like, guys, I got to go to bed. I do too. If somebody marched in and said, you know what, Bob, because of something that you did in your past that we didn't like, we're going to rip that Hall of Fame plaque off your wall. Or if somebody came into me and said, we don't like something you did, so that North Carolina Filmmaker of the Year award, we're taking the trophy and the plaque away. I mean, how would we feel if that happened to us? It's like, wait a minute. Like, you celebrated us because we did great things for you, or you celebrated us because we made you money, or we brought attention to you, the school, or you, the program, or whatever. But the second that we do something that you may not agree with, or the second that it comes out that you did something that I was also a part of, now you want to punish me?
Mm-hmm. And one really had nothing to do with the other. I'm a big fan of imagery, as you know, and as you also know, having known me for a while, my personal life, especially when I was younger, I was a mess. Drinking problem, et cetera. I was a mess outside of athletics. However, I did coach some wonderful teams. We won a lot of championships. We won. I was fortunate to be part of a Hall of Fame team. I won some Pro-Am championships as a beach volleyball player. So, like you said, that's similar to someone kicking in my door right now and taking all this, all the plaques and awards and victories that I won, and going into the books of the meets that we won as a team, or the competitions that I won as a player, and put a line through the name Bob Rose, because my personal life was such a mess. One had nothing to do with the other. Reggie Bush, yeah, he did wrong. Yeah, he should have been punished, but not for his exploits on the football field. Give the man back his damn Heisman.
And that's how we're going to end the show. Guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us for an hour and 15 minutes. Actually saw one of the higher live viewing numbers that we have
Nice.
In the last few months. So we really appreciate you guys continuing to spread the word of what we're doing here. Hoping to have some really fun and interesting news for you guys in the next week or so regarding a couple things. So happy to do that. Believe it or not, we have one more of these to give away. Guess what? I found a third one.
Whoa.
Where did that come from? So we're going to actually do another giveaway as well. So we're excited to share that news with you guys in the coming weeks, as well as we are just a couple weeks away from kickoff of the 2023-24 NFL season. Bob, in the meantime, before we start giving things away for free again, where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
Folks, thanks for bearing with us tonight. Thanks for being part of your Bayou Blitz family and making it your show, your podcast. And to that end, remember to funnel your friends, your family, other Saints fans to the Bayou Blitz Facebook page, to the Bayou Blitz Twitter page, at Bayou Blitz Pod. You can also follow me in the meantime, Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 on Twitter. I publish all of my articles on my personal pages, but you can follow all of us, myself, John Hendricks, Kyle Mosley, and Ross Jackson, at the Saints News Network on Twitter, or at Saints News over. I'm tired. At Saints News over on Twitter, Saints News Network on Facebook. Yeah, those things.
Yeah, it's all social media. It's content. You find the content at Bobby R 2613. Yeah, I should know that after the year and whatever. For myself, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at BT Boylan. You can follow my production company, Bottom of the Mug Productions, at BOTMPROD. That on Twitter. I'm gonna be honest, there's not a whole lot there right now, but there's a lot of exciting things coming up. If you guys care to, I have other podcasts out, including a sit-down interview with the president of my alma mater, talking about Gardner-Webb going into a new football season with the Ohio Valley Conference and the Big South not merging, but playing for a shared title. Interesting stuff. College football is changing a lot. We don't have enough time to talk about all that either. But college football is changing a lot. In the meantime, make sure you follow Bob, all the work with the Saints News Network, John, Ross, and Kyle. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Bayou Blitz podcast. Find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Until then, we'll see you next week.